Red Bull went to Spa searching for free speed, and the toe was supposed to be the answer. Instead, it may have exposed the exact weakness Max Verstappen could not hide. Earlier in the weekend, Verstappen had already shown serious pace, setting a 1 minute, 47.070 lap. But later, he was 472 thousandths behind the fastest car. At a circuit where slipstream, electrical energy, and straight-line speed can decide everything, that gap was a warning. Because a toe only works when three things align perfectly. The distance has to be right. The electrical boost has to arrive at the right moment. And the car still needs enough grip when the straight ends. Red Bull appeared to chase the advantage on the straight. But if Verstappen was too far back, the slipstream was weak. If he was too close, the disturbed air could hurt the next corner. And if Red Bull's electrical deployment faded too early, the toe could look powerful for a few seconds, then disappear when Verstappen needed it most. That means the desperate strategy may not have failed because of one mistake. It may have backfired because Red Bull were trying to use the toe to hide a deeper straight-line problem. And once that problem is exposed, it does not only threaten qualifying. It threatens every attack, every defense, and every lap of the race. Subscribe to the channel. To understand why Red Bull reached for the toe, you have to understand what Spa does to a Formula One car. This circuit forces every team into a compromise. The car needs enough downforce to stay planted through the fast corners. But every extra piece of wing creates more resistance on the straights. It is like running with a parachute behind you. The parachute gives stability in one situation, but it makes every step harder in another. At Spa, Red Bull could not simply remove downforce and trust Verstappen to solve the rest. The fast sections demand confidence. One nervous movement at high speed can destroy the lap, damage the tires, or force the driver to lift. So Red Bull needed stability. But stability came with drag. And that is where the toe became so tempting. When one car follows another along a straight, the leading car breaks through the air first. The following car then faces less resistance and can gain speed more easily. In theory, it was the perfect solution. Red Bull could keep enough wing on Verstappen's car for the corners, then use the slipstream to recover speed on the straight. But here is where the danger began. A toe is not guaranteed speed. It is borrowed speed. And borrowed speed depends on somebody else. The car ahead has to accelerate at the right moment. The gap has to remain useful. Verstappen has to enter the slipstream without getting so close that the disturbed air damages his grip. Every part of the plan has to align. That sounds manageable until qualifying reaches its final minutes. Then every driver starts searching for space. Some cars slow down. Others accelerate suddenly. Teams release their drivers into traffic. The circuit becomes crowded with people trying to create the perfect gap at exactly the same time. And Red Bull were asking Verstappen to find precision inside that chaos. Too far behind, and the toe becomes weak. Too close, and the Red Bull loses clean air before the next corner. That difference can be decided in seconds. Sometimes less. Imagine trying to follow another car through thick fog. Stay too far back, and you lose sight of it. Move too close, and you have no time to react. The safe distance and the useful distance are not always the same. That was Red Bull's problem. They were not simply trying to place Verstappen behind another car. They were trying to place him at the exact distance where the straight-line gain would be larger than the cornering loss. And Spa gives the driver almost no time to judge whether that balance is working. The speed rises quickly. The gap changes quickly. The braking zone arrives quickly. By the time Verstappen could fully understand the toe, the most important part of the straight may already have passed. But the real issue went deeper than positioning. Red Bull also had to manage electrical energy. Modern Formula One cars use stored electrical power to support acceleration. That extra energy can make the car pull harder out of corners and continue building speed down the straight. But the supply is limited. The team cannot use maximum electrical assistance everywhere. They have to choose. Spend more energy early, and Verstappen gains immediately. Save more for later, and he risks losing time before reaching the final part of the straight. Now combine that with the toe. The slipstream may begin helping the car at one point. But if the electrical boost begins fading at the same time, the full benefit becomes difficult to see. For a moment, the Red Bull closes. Then the rate of acceleration changes. The car ahead stops coming toward Verstappen as quickly. And suddenly, the toe that looked promising begins to feel ineffective. That does not necessarily mean the slipstream disappeared. It may mean Red Bull could no longer exploit it properly. That is an important difference. Because if the distance was wrong, the team could adjust the gap. If the energy deployment was wrong, the engineers could move the boost to another part of the lap. But when both problems happen together, fixing one can make the other worse. Move Verstappen closer, and the toe becomes stronger. But the dirty air becomes more damaging. Use more electrical energy on the straight, and the acceleration improves. But less energy remains later in the lap. Reduce the rear wing, and the car gains speed. But Verstappen loses stability through the fast corners. Every solution demands a sacrifice. And this is why the strategy began to look desperate. Red Bull were not using the toe as a small bonus. They appeared to need it as part of the lap. That changes the entire level of risk. When a toe is optional, the driver can still produce a strong time without it. When a toe becomes necessary, the whole qualifying attempt depends on traffic behaving as expected. And traffic never behaves perfectly. One driver can slow down to prepare the tires. Another can create a larger gap. A car can appear at the wrong moment. The pit wall can give an instruction that becomes outdated seconds later. Then Verstappen has to react. Reacting is never as clean as preparing. A prepared driver knows where the gain will arrive. He knows how much speed to expect. He can judge the braking point before the car reaches it. A reacting driver has to discover all of that while the lap is already unfolding. And at Spa, the cost of hesitation is enormous. If the toe gives Verstappen more speed than expected, he reaches the braking zone faster. That sounds positive. But he still has to stop the car. He has to judge the extra closing speed. He has to trust the front tires. He has to know whether the disturbed air has reduced his grip. One small uncertainty can force an earlier brake application. And that can erase part of the straight line gain immediately. This is what makes a failed toe so difficult to understand from one number. The car may be faster at the end of the straight, yet the total sector can still be slower. The toe can work aerodynamically. The lap can still fail strategically. That is the detail most people miss. Red Bull were not chasing the highest speed. They were chasing the fastest complete lap. And those are not always the same thing. A stronger slipstream may create more speed in a straight line. But if it compromises the next corner, overheats the tires, or forces Verstappen to change his braking point, the stopwatch can punish the entire plan. The gain appears. Then it disappears. And by the end of the lap, the driver is left with the risk, but not the reward. That is why Verstappen's earlier pace made the situation even more frustrating. He had already shown that the car could be competitive. The raw ability was there. The confidence was there. But the later gap suggested Red Bull needed more than a clean lap to fight at the very front. They needed help from the air. They needed help from the battery. They needed help from the timing. And they needed all three at once. That is too many moving pieces for one qualifying attempt to control comfortably. The pressure then falls on Verstappen. He has to compensate for the setup. He has to judge the toe. He has to protect the tires. He has to manage the battery. And he still has to attack every corner with the commitment required for pole. That is not one task. It is several tasks hidden inside one lap. And even a driver as precise as Verstappen cannot control every one of them. He cannot choose how the car ahead accelerates. He cannot create more stored energy. He cannot remove aerodynamic drag from inside the cockpit. He can only take the situation Red Bull gives him and try to make it work. That is why the toe backfired. Not because slipstreaming at Spa is a bad idea. Because Red Bull may have asked the toe to solve too many problems at the same time. It had to compensate for drag. It had to support the electrical deployment. It had to create a qualifying advantage. And it had to do all of that without disturbing Verstappen's cornering performance. The margin was too narrow. The dependencies were too high. And once the gap or energy window moved slightly away from the plan, Verstappen had no simple way to recover. But the most worrying part was not the failed qualifying attempt. It was what that failure suggested about the race. Because if Red Bull needed the perfect toe for one lap, Verstappen could face the same weakness every time he tried to overtake, defend, or stay attached to a faster car on the straights. And this is where Red Bull's qualifying gamble becomes much more serious. Because one failed toe can be dismissed as bad timing. A repeated straight-line weakness cannot. If Verstappen needed the slipstream to stay competitive over one qualifying lap, then the race would force Red Bull to confront the same problem over and over again. Every attack would require energy. Every defense would require energy. Every lap spent following another car would place Verstappen in disturbed air. And every time the battery began to fade, the Red Bull would risk becoming vulnerable at the exact point where Spa punishes weakness most brutally. The long straights. That is the real danger. In qualifying, Red Bull could prepare one attempt around a specific car ahead. They could calculate the gap. They could choose the moment. They could try to place Verstappen inside the strongest part of the slipstream. In the race, that control disappears. The car ahead chooses the pace. The car behind chooses when to attack. Traffic changes constantly. Tires wear. Fuel burns away. and the electrical energy available to Verstappen changes from lap to lap. The toe is no longer a planned tool. It becomes part of a moving fight. That changes everything. Imagine Verstappen sitting behind a rival through the middle sector. He needs to remain close enough to use the slipstream on the straight. But following another car makes the front of the Red Bull less effective. The steering feels weaker. The tires slide more. The car loses a small amount of grip. That forces Verstappen to work harder just to stay within range. Then he reaches the straight. Now Red Bull needs the electrical system to deliver. If the battery is fully prepared, Verstappen can attack. If it is not, he may gain at first, then stop closing before the braking zone. That creates the worst possible outcome. He has damaged the tires while following. He has spent energy while attacking. And he still has not completed the pass. Now Red Bull must recover. The battery needs charging. The tires need cooling. The gap to the car ahead may begin growing. And the opportunity disappears. This is why a failed toe in qualifying can reveal more than one bad lap. It can expose a car that needs too many perfect conditions. Clean air, fresh tires, careful deployment, a precise gap, the right wing level. One mistake in any of those areas, and the Red Bull stops looking comfortable. That is a dangerous position for a team built around Verstappen's ability to control races from the front. From the lead, the driver can decide when to push. He can protect the battery. He can manage the tires. He can choose the racing line. From behind, he loses that freedom. Now the rival controls the speed. The rival controls the corner entry. The rival can use electrical energy exactly when Verstappen prepares to attack. And every unsuccessful move costs Red Bull more than lap time. It costs options. That is the hidden value of energy in modern Formula One. It is not only power. It is freedom. A full battery gives the driver choices.